If you're familiar with my concept of currency for role playing systems, then this should be pretty swift and easy to look at 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars and mention a few of the variables that interact with one another in this way. Now, I will begin in a sort of reductionist way at the smallest level, which would be inside of a mission in which a set of threat tokens has been designated and alien abilities are in play and things like that, and our troopers are in the thick of it all. So I'm focusing, there are many other things to look at, but I'm focusing on the threat tokens and the injuries that the troopers take, which are called somewhat confusingly maybe kills, but they don't necessarily kill you. They are just kills, and think of them as wounds. So this is handled, sort of the confrontation of the threat tokens and the wounds that the troopers might take, and in fact the reduction of the threat tokens by what the troopers do, um, through dice rolls. And in the context of those dice rolls flying all over the place with people rolling dice every which way for many different things and range and stuff coming into it. Well, anyway, what we have really is an interaction between the number of encounters and the threat tokens per encounter. And since the threat tokens per encounter are variable, we don't really know how many encounters we're going to get into or how many threat tokens are inside them. Now, notice I talked about kills being taken by the troopers as a primary variable here because between encounters, there is a one kill recovery. So therefore, if you took a kill and are therefore a mess during an encounter, you will be fine for the next encounter. And the same goes for the different degrees. You bump up by one. So therefore, a whole lot of encounters, which would mean less threat tokens each, means that for the whole mission, people will be sustaining less kills. But then again, who knows? So the dice can do different things. But anyway, so those are these two variables that are kind of interacting with one another at a slightly higher level than just one encounter. So during this whole period, the variables of strengths and weaknesses will come in because if somebody can activate a strength, then that means that they can clear an encounter of threat tokens. And if somebody activates a weakness, they can not take any more kills because they get out of there, and also reduce it by one threat token. So these are the pieces that are kind of bumping up against one another through the course of a mission. So we've looked at inside an encounter, among encounters on a mission, and then we look at this whole mission. And at that point, a larger scale set of variables interact, which is the possibility of one or more troopers leveling up, which in this game means adding one to one of your two attributes. Everybody starts with a total of 10 in the two attributes, and leveling up means that your total goes to 11, or then later goes to a 12, and whatever. So that can be occurring per character, although typically not more than one or two per mission. At the same time, troopers may be dying. And when they die, because in this game, life is cheap and death is free, and replacement is actually part of the process, when a trooper dies, then they will be coming in with a total of 10. So if we just look at the values of the attributes, you can see that in a variable, non-uniform way, troopers will be leveling up. This one this time, that time, or whatever, however that may be going. And then at the same time, we are losing troopers and therefore coming in with a total of 10 with a new guy. So that variable, just how high are our attributes, is continuing. That will interact mission by mission with the means at arriving at the alien ability, the opposing ability that is rolled very similarly. So that is an extremely interesting and random thing, but it's not too surprising that in a kind of meandering way, it does go up. So the next point here is the biggest picture, or a much bigger picture than that. So we've got what happens inside the missions. We've got what happens in terms of trooper values. That's sort of the wrong word, the quantitative values of their attributes. Now maybe we're talking about values of a different kind, because now we're talking about per trooper whether the tendency to rank up is occurring basically or not. Because a lot of the time, the individuals who rank up will be the ones with the lower fighting abilities. And the ones with the higher fighting abilities tend to be the ones who rack up the most kills. Now, these do vary a bit. There's some diciness going on here, some dice effects that, or the stochasticity of the dice puts us into a non-deterministic or a non-utterly predictable relationship, that the ones who tend to go up in level and get very high attributes are the opposite of the ones who tend to go up in rank. There's a fuzzy tendency in that direction, is what I would say. In the case of the game I'm playing, one of the troopers very much demonstrates one end of that spectrum, and one of them very much demonstrates the other end of that spectrum, but the other characters are kind of, blends or middle range between those variables. Well, what does this mean, though? In terms of actually going up in your attributes, your chances of survival go up. And then second, the tendency for ranking up is very important, because you start to interact with policy. At the levels of rank above just the available starting levels, one comes into contact with people who are making policy decisions, and the potential to interact with them, or the potential to observe the processes by which these decisions are made. And then if you get up into the higher levels of rank, making the policy yourself, choosing whether to go on the mission at all, not just for yourself, but in terms of, for example, destroying the system from afar and just not going on this, not having a mission, or any number of other things, as I'll get to in just a moment. But if you get really higher up in the ranks, which is in fact possible, you may find yourself, confronting the brigadier of the whole brigade, and you may conceivably become that person. Even before that point, your interaction with a fairly small inner circle of policymakers and being treated as an equal by them, or a threat perhaps to their cabal, who knows, is real. So that the ranking up actually starts to matter. Your decisions start to affect the fate and the risks of the lower ranked characters. Now, those lower ranked characters, in my experience anyway, at least some of them tend to get up to a lot of shenanigans. Sabotage through carelessness or irresponsibility, or direct loathing for the command structure that they are trapped in. Any number of other things. There's no particular reason for somebody to be faithful to the mission. I mean, you can escape combats even without using a weakness. So there's plenty of ways basically to be a pretty bad trooper. So not everybody who stays in the lower ranks does that, but a lot of them do. So you get some interesting instabilities, or at least unpredictable aspects of what missions are going to be like when the characters have undergone these degrees of development. So I hope you can see that these are nested, and I hope you can also see that it is not just a little widgety mechanism. We're not quite sure where these numbers are going to end up or for whom, and we're not quite sure how people will latch onto these things in terms of their own aesthetics, their own intuitions. All of that means that the biggest matrix of all, which is not going to be handed to you from the book, the biggest matrix of all is everybody's collective notion of what their characters are doing here, what here even is. What does it mean to be on this brigade? What is this brigade doing? And what we think about that, whether it turns into, harsh black comedy, whether it turns into anything else, is very much up to the group, and I don't think can be preset through any kind of conversation. So put these 3 layers that I just talked about with their numerical effects in, as I say, in this case, I'm being kind of reductionist, radiating from the smallest to the next and then to the largest, put that whole thing into this bigger matrix of aesthetics and intuition and interaction among us. And I hope you can see why I think the currency of this game deserves some study.